Hey, hello and welcome all. Welcome to today's event. This is a roundtable discussion with the Southwest Regional Manufacturing Association. My name is Jeff Poirier. I'm the board president. Today I'm going to be moderating the event. If this is your first event, welcome. The purpose of the SRMA is to be a nonprofit within Southwest Florida, and we promote the idea exchange between businesses, some synergy between businesses. We provide resources and contacts and basically advocate for manufacturing within the region. So these events, we try to find gaps in the knowledge base of the industry and resources for manufacturers here in Southwest Florida. And our goal is to create discussion and go back and forth with some experts in different fields and provide what we can for assistance to any manufacturers here. So today's event specifically will deal with strategic personnel management. In this event, we're going to ask panelists a combination of questions regarding the importance of strategic human resources and decision-making within the workplace. So this is specifically for manufacturing firms, but for firms in general. And we're going to be broadly discussing how to hire, how to give annual reviews, what should be in an employee handbook, the benefits of outsourcing your HR, and really just any questions surrounding personnel management and strategy for a business. So when you run a business, you start to realize the value of your employees and how the business success can be directly tied to their personal growth and their own personal investment within your firm. So we're going to have questions surrounding that and try to give examples of why that makes sense and why we push for proper strategic personnel management. So today we have three panelists. I'd like to do a quick intro of each one of those. We have Suzanne Boy from Boy Agnew Potanovic, I could have butchered that, law firm, Kim Hansen from KHR Solutions, and Bill Welch from Career Source of Southwest Florida. So I want to thank all three of you for giving your time today to the Southwest Regional Manufacturing Association. Without your help, we wouldn't be able to put these events on. And with that, I'm going to give each panelist maybe a minute or two to introduce their firm and why they would be here today regarding strategic personnel management. So Suzanne, if you want to start, I think you're first on my list.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. As Jeff said, my name is Suzanne Boy, and I'm an attorney with Boy Agnew Potanovic, and Potanovic is a hard one. That's why he didn't end up with his name first in the firm name. So we are a boutique employment and litigation firm here in Fort Myers. I'm board certified by the Florida Bar in labor and employment law, and all we do is represent management. So we call it management side employment law, only representing employers, and we don't represent the employee. We handle all types of litigation, administrative charges. My favorite side of my practice and why I think it's important to have the discussions like we're having today is the proactive side of my practice, where I get to advise clients, businesses, government agencies on how to proactively avoid the employee issues that ultimately end up in litigation where no employer ever wants to be. So I appreciate you guys having me here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Suzanne. Kim next, Kim with KHR Solutions. Go ahead, Kim.
Yes, thank you so much for joining today. My name is Kim Hansen. I run a firm called KHR Solutions, and we do outsourced HR consulting. So whether it's a question here or there through fully outsourced HR department, we have three different levels that we support based on the business needs and size. And we really enjoy getting entrenched with the organizations. So we do have varied organizations, so not just manufacturing do we have on our plate, but we go to a lumber yard and boat dealerships. So when there's a day that you don't know what you want to do, you just pick a bit industry and work in that one. So I kind of have fun, and I know Suzanne has a lot of variety too. It's a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing if I can help out.
Perfect, thank you, Kim. And last but not least, Bill Welch. Now, I don't know if I need to disclose this, but Bill is actually a board member with the SRMA as well too. So if you have questions regarding Career Source or the SRMA, Bill is your man. So Bill.
Well, thank you very much for introduction there. Yes, I am on the board of the SRMA, but I am with Career Source Southwest Florida. We're a nonprofit as well, and what we do is we connect job seekers and with hiring needs with the employers, as well as offset some training costs. So we have a variety of different services and programs we offer employers. My specialty is with the employers and business services at Career Source.
Perfect, thank you, Bill. All right, so just rehashing, these roundtables are for discussion, debate. basically topics that business owners and management might not have time to address during the week. So while you might not take detailed notes, I hope you can at least take something away from these discussions, maybe even a contact or someone to reach out to. And as a side note, just personally, I feel like exchange and business growth, and nowadays, with you have the internet and large, variety of information out there, more it's looking for the questions to apply to your business, right? So, how do I handle a conflict resolution? Now you can find the internet solutions, or you can find the person to contact on the internet. So try to pinpoint questions I may ask, or something that, might fit your business. And from there, you can either reach out to the SRMA, or you can reach out to one of the panelists, and we'll try to connect you. So while Southwest Florida isn't typically known for its manufacturing base, our goal is to change that. So changing an industry and building a new foundation for manufacturing is obviously difficult. And I've personally dealt with trying to find qualified employees within the region. So HR, I know, is tough down here. So that makes strategic personnel management even more important, right? Losing valuable employees and having gaps within your organization is a real big concern. So how you handle those gaps and how you handle your HR and your personnel is critically important to how well your business runs. So we're trying to create, through these, synergistic regional relationships between manufacturers, between affiliates and manufacturers, provide you with access to grants and, information that you may need locally to grow your business. So reach out to us if you have questions. We'll connect you to the right person. We have a website, srma.net. If you have any questions, you can go there. It'll show our new events and everything as well too. So we are a nonprofit. So your membership and sponsorship for these events is what we grow on. We want to build this community and build the manufacturing region down here. So the larger and more, revenue we have as a nonprofit, the more we can help and benefit the community. So from there, I'm going to start the roundtable discussion. The event will be recorded and put on a website at a later date. So during the event, as the audience member, you can go to the chat feature on the bottom of Zoom, and you can ask a question. Every few minutes, I'll try to look down and see if there's any new questions and address those to the right panelist. So if I don't get to them during the middle of the chat, I'll try to do it at the end. Or like I said, you can email us at info@srma.net or visit the website and ask any follow-up questions for the panelists. So we try to make these events good for all size businesses. I know we have a lot of smaller businesses here and some larger ones, or for any level of management within the business, right? So the panelists, if you're speaking out anything and you have some acronyms or initialisms, I'd ask that you just speak them out fully so that everyone is aware, or maybe, give us a little bit of a background on what you're discussing, just in case. So assume the audience is somewhat familiar, but not fully familiar. And then in trying to keep some continuity between topics, I may ask some of the panelists the same question or leave some of the questions open, just so they'll jump in and maybe they want to answer something that was asked to a different panelist. There is some overlap in the background of all of these individuals, but it doesn't mean that they're all suited to answer all the questions. So I will jump around a little bit, but it makes it a little more fun. And I have not let the panelists know what the questions are, so they are answering on the fly if it attests to how good they are at their role. So there are questions that I may answer as well. You don't typically see a business up here. This business strategy is internal to a company and might be considered IP. So typically we fill the panelists with firms that can assist your business, but I may have some anecdotal responses that are my personal opinion. I'm not a professional in HR, and this is not professional advice. It's just me talking. So I'm going to get started with asking some questions. I'm going to start with you, Bill. Career Source. What do you do if no one's familiar, and what's the affiliation to the state and the benefits that you provide to the local community?
Yeah, so we cover a 5-county area here in Southwest Florida. We work with, as you mentioned, all businesses, as well as individuals that are either new to the area, want to change careers, are underemployed. So we work with both sets of groups of individuals and employers. So we work with everybody from like you said, big manufacturers, big companies, as well as 1- and 2-person operations. And the whole idea is we're trying to network and actually partner with the community at large, even with Kim's organization and the educational system, as well as other manufacturers, connecting them together. And at the state level, we work with the state of Florida, Career Source Florida, as well as Florida Makes, to try to help businesses grow and succeed.
Perfect. So what's, I could say, your primary responsibility in this area? Is it training? Is it more on the employee side? What do you guys succeed in the most, I would say, from Career Sources perspective?
Yeah, well, we have a wide range. We cover, like I said, a 5-county area. So we've got 5 different centers in that area. And we've got some people that specialize in working with candidates or job seekers and individuals. And we have other ones that, like myself, that work with the employers. And we really do try to help them out with, and it could be advice, it could be consulting, it could be referring them to at the state level, trying to get them training grants, trying to get them extra money for training, among a lot of other areas. And if we don't have the answers, sort of like the SRMA, if we don't have the answers, we'll find the answers for that individual and those manufacturers.
Perfect. All right, jumping around a little bit and giving each panelist a different question. Suzanne, I know I want to get the COVID questions out of the way because I'm getting kind of tired of dealing with it. Is there any liability that the business should be looking out for regarding COVID-19 and internal policy? Was there any legislation passed that would protect a firm regardless of what they make for a decision?
So COVID has been a hot topic, as we all know, for the last year plus. And there's been a lot of litigation actually on both the employment side and more recently on the just general business side. So on, starting with the general business side, the state of Florida just passed legislation last month, or maybe even earlier this month, that is basically a COVID liability protection bill for businesses. That's not employment specific. It's more for businesses who have, individuals who are accessing from the public. And what that does is it offers a very broad protection from businesses being held liable for individuals contracting COVID or allegedly contracting COVID from interacting with the business. So for example, if you have a retail store and someone comes in and they claim that they contracted COVID from one of your employees or from someone in your store and they try to sue you, this bill makes it much more difficult for that person to sue the business because there is a shorter statute of limitations. It's 1 year. There's a much higher standard that they have to meet, and they actually even have to have a doctor's certification that the doctor verifies that with a reasonable degree of medical certainty, the doctor believes the person contracted COVID from that business. So it's a very high standard and it's a very broad protection for businesses from COVID liability. On the employment side, we've had tons of legislation. The most significant would be the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA. We love, Kim, I know we'll laugh at, the acronyms because we live in the world of acronyms in HR and employment law. And so I will definitely try to spell them out as I go forward because there's lots of them. But the Families First Coronavirus Response Act was enacted at the very beginning of COVID. And that's what offered paid leave for employees of businesses that had 500 or fewer employees and government entities. And so employers for the very first time were required to offer paid leave, for COVID-related reasons, for school closures, daycare closures, and most employers, all employers in the private sector who were covered, were able to seek a tax credit for any amounts owed that they paid out to their employees. So that was a huge change last year. It was interesting to implement. There's poster requirements that businesses should have up on their bulletin boards. That law has now become voluntary for businesses. So you can still choose to offer the paid leave under the FFCRA through September 30th of this year and seek the tax credit, but you are not required to do it any longer like you were in 2020 while the law was in effect. So the FFCRA is the biggest, employment related COVID legislation that came out last year. We also had guidance from the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That's the federal agency that is charged with dealing with discrimination and harassment, retaliation in the workforce. There were questions about, can employers require vaccines, all sorts of fun stuff in the employment law world.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, and regarding handbook and policy internally, Kim, this one will go to you. So how important is an HR handbook? And I'll give you some more anecdotal evidence here. Is, typically when I get into a business, the first thing I want to do is drive, process and control and all that. And I typically tend to ignore the HR side of things. When in
Okay.
reality, about a year later, I circled back and said I should have implemented more on the HR side because it's kind of a guidebook for your workers to manage from.
And guidebook is the perfect word for that, because the reality is it is absolutely useless if you're not going by it. So if you have one and it's written, it better capture how you're really running the business. And it has a couple of different things in it. When I roll out a handbook to people, I always outline, this is a tool for both sides. This lets you know what you can expect from your employer, and it also lets them tell you what they expect of you. When you have a question about, what's going to happen, attendance, great example. No surprise, you have a job. We expect you to be here every day on time. But do you know what on time means? Because every manager is different. So by using that handbook, it allows that team member who's new to learn from their new supervisor what their version of on time is. Because I love my morning coffee. And when I have a commute, and then I want to, make sure that I get a cup of coffee maybe before I sit down to my desk for the morning. If I'm going to do that, that's my time. That's not working time. So I have to count that in my schedule. If somebody who works for me doesn't know that my version of working means sitting down to work, they're not going to meet my expectations, and it's going to set us up for a negative impact. But I also am telling them in the handbook that I'm going to comply with the federal laws and the state laws, and I'm going to outline which ones they are. And if I'm under 15 employees, I'm not going to put an equal employment opportunity a policy in there, because I don't have to comply with that. I'm not going to discriminate, but I'm not going to put things in there I don't need.
Okay. Do you feel the handbook acts as a crutch for maybe an inexperienced manager that deals with confrontation, or gives them a little bit of a backbone?
The backbone, absolutely. Because if I'm a manager and somebody comes to me, when you create the handbook, you don't want to create policies when someone is in front of you crying. You want to create the policies when you are in a strategy session with your leaders about what's it going to take, how long can I run this business? If, let's say, I'm under 50 employees and I do not have to offer Family Medical Leave Act, which is up to 12 weeks of unpaid time away, I don't have to offer that. So now I'm with a smaller employer, and if somebody's going to go out on a disability leave or have a baby, how long can I run the business without them? If I have 10 employees, maybe I can only run the business without them for 3 weeks, and I'm going to hold their job for 3 weeks. I can let them know ahead of time, and then the manager is not making a decision with the person in front of them. They're just saying, oh, let's look at the book, magic book. It's kind of like Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, right? You've got the magic book that just has things jumping out of it.
Perfect. So I guess this one can be for Susan. Do you recommend a 3-strike policy when you're talking about conflict resolution at work? And then how do small businesses handle, a 3-strike policy when they only have 15 employees?
Mhm.
Do I get rid of my best employee because he's at strike 6, or, how do you apply that fairly across the workforce?
So that's a great question. And before I tackle that, I want to jump on something Kim said, because I couldn't, and it actually segues, I think, pretty well with your question. I couldn't agree more with what Kim said about, having a handbook but not following it, because that can be an absolute disaster from a litigation perspective. Because if you have a handbook, the plaintiff's attorney is going to get it once you get sued, and they're going to go through the policies like a 3-strike policy that you have in there and say, well, why didn't you warn this person? Why didn't you suspend this person? Why did you go straight to termination? And so having the handbook is great. And I 100% recommend that every business have one, but it's not enough to just have it. You have to also follow it. And then another point that Kim mentioned with respect to the Family Medical Leave Act is a great point. And I'm sure Kim has seen this. I know I have seen it. If you don't have 50 employees, do not have an FMLA policy in your handbook. You shouldn't have policies that you're not legally required to follow. And I bring that up specifically because we've actually had a couple of smaller businesses get sued for FMLA coverage, even though they didn't have 50 employees, but they had an FMLA policy in their handbook. And so for the smaller businesses out there, don't have an FMLA policy in your handbook if you're not subject to the FMLA. Going back to the 3 strikes policy, I think that it is good to have a disciplinary policy. You want employees to know, and particularly for your managers to know, what general processes they need to follow when there is a performance issue or when there is a disciplinary issue. And 3 strikes can be a good policy to have. You want to be careful, though, to make it an exclusive 3 strikes policy, because you always want to have some wiggle room and spelled out in your handbook that says there may be circumstances where we don't follow these steps exactly. So for example, if somebody just has run-of-the-mill issues with performance like attendance, a 3 strikes policy can be very simple to follow. However, if someone comes and punches somebody in the face, you're not going to follow your 3 strikes policy. You're going to terminate them, hopefully. So you want to have some wiggle room, even though it's a good idea to have a disciplinary policy. Make sure that it gives you the discretion to advance farther through the process when the circumstances warrant.
Okay. And now verbal versus written, I guess, policy. Do you have to record anything verbal? Or is
So
Go ahead.
from a legal perspective, you don't have to record it, but you should record it, because if it's not written down somewhere, it didn't happen in the employment law world, at least. So while you're not going to necessarily, for a verbal warning, have a form that you fill out that the employee signs, the manager who's giving the warning should at a minimum make notes in the file that they had a conversation with John Doe on April 21st about this, workplace issue, because it's really important, not only from a litigation standpoint, because you want to have the documentation to show that you gave that verbal warning, but when you are ultimately having to move to the next step, you want to be able to refer back to it with the employee. Same thing with evaluations down the road. You want to be able to remember the issues that you discussed with the employee throughout the year. So even if it's just as simple as a manager keeping notes of the verbal warning, there should definitely be some documentation available to the employer for a verbal.
Okay. And then along the same along the same topic, if you have a difficult employee or you're, managing conflict resolution, if I find gaps in my policy, should I be, proactively adding those back into my handbook? Or is that something that I need to sit down and consult with maybe my outside HR or my legal expertise on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always good to consult with people who are experts, and whether it's HR, employment law, particularly when you're making changes to a policy. I do think, and I'm sure Kim has experienced this as well, we all learn. As the more experience we get, we all learn things. I still, to this day, tweak my own policies that I give to clients all the time, because a situation will arise that I've never had to address before. And I think, oh, this is something I can address in a handbook like this going forward. So it's a constantly evolving process, I think, for everybody. And I think it's important, not only for the employers to revise their policies as they continue to get experience and as they have new circumstances arise, but then having the backstop of an expert in the area look into it, I think, is also a good idea.
Okay. And as that relates,
can I just add
ahead,
to
Kim.
that
Yep.
really quickly? One thing I do find is that sometimes people want to throw additions to policies to give them that backbone we talked about later, when they really need to deal with the human that's doing it and not change it for everyone. So that's why, Suzanne's recommendation to go to consult with someone, whether it's maybe it's a peer in your industry, or someone who's a specialist in HR, or, an attorney who is a specialist, by far more than an HR professional with regard to law, because you can always do more than what's in your handbook, but you can't do less. So the more you tweak those policies, the more you pigeonhole yourself to an action that you have to absolutely do. So the wording in there can be very precise. Something as simple as adding on no PTO will be paid after the last day of active employment. I had to learn that one through a settlement. Who would have thought that you needed to actually have that in writing? But now it's a really nice addition. And yes, that's easy to add in for all policies moving forward. Something so simple as you must be clocked in by 8:02. Maybe that pigeonholes you too much.
And I agree with both of you that, 30 seconds here, but yeah, I agree with both of you. I've actually seen it over and over again where, as Kim was mentioning, that instead of dealing with that one individual, especially with a small employer manufacturer, they will actually come out and set a whole new set of rules instead of dealing with that one individual who is causing the issue or the problem to begin with. And instead, they're actually dampering the whole environment for the whole employer, instead of just dealing with that one individual by changing the handbook.
That's a good point. So this next one's going to probably do a round robin here for everyone. So I'll start with Kim. Why are job descriptions so important? Why is it good to define job? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, very similar to the handbook, it sets that expectation. And but again, I'm going to go back to the exact same example. If you don't go over it with the team member, they're not going to know what it means. So if you have a job description that says greet customers professionally and courteously upon arrival, that can be interpreted so many different ways. And so as a business owner or a leader of the front office team, you have to set the tone of what does that mean to you, because they will not read your mind. They are going to base professional and courtesy and the definition of that on every person they've worked for in the past. And sometimes we're hiring people who haven't worked for anyone, and their parents may or may not have held them accountable to anything. So let's start with that. You might be the first person offering accountability to a human ever at 24. It's kind of scary, but that's a different topic.
So,
and then we go
ahead.
through, so you have to go through and line by line, tell them what you mean by that, because then you're setting the stage for, I want you to be success. This is my first coaching with you. And I believe in a coaching culture. People don't wake up and say, I want to be awful at work today, but it happens every single day. And that's because they go through the process of not knowing what it means to be great, or at least okay, because I'm pulling it off today. So if okay is the goal, then tell them what okay, the minimum expectations is, very clearly. And then when they have that off day, wow, it's really an off day. I noticed this. Can you step that up a bit? Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize. Yes, thank you. It's coachable. And then when they don't behave differently, that's when you go through the process of getting to that discipline and say, we coached about this and you got your notes. So we talked about it on this date. And I really thought we were clear, and you said you understood, and now you're still doing it. So now it's an on purpose instead of an accident. So let's fix these on purposes. But really that job description, it absolutely outlines how you can go through line by line on what you expect them to accomplish through their role. And then the back end of that job description should have, if you are 15 or over, all of the physical capabilities that they need to have to be able to perform that. Because if you have to go into some type of an accommodation, if I can no longer type because I have an office job and typing is an absolute requirement of the role, I need to have it documented that use of the hands is a requirement of the job. And is it a reasonable accommodation for my business to purchase the talk to text technology for that person because they've had an accident where they've lost the use of their hands? You really set yourself up with the job description where you're also outlining all the physical capabilities that you need to be able to perform that job effectively.
Yeah,
Go ahead. No, I was going
to sit there and say, I was going to sit there and say, I actually go even a little bit sooner than that. You'd be surprised how many manufacturers I talk to, and I ask for a job description or trying to fill a position, and there is no job description. So for just to add a little more credence to what Kim was saying, for me, a job description is a starting point for that particular position. And it at least sets the stage to be able to move forward and tweak it as you go along. But, or I'll ask for a job description from the manufacturer and I get a 2-sentence response in an email. And it's like, that's really not a job description. And like Kim was saying, you got to put a little more meat into it to set up the expectations for whoever's going to be hired for that position.
Okay. And along those same lines, I was actually circling back towards you, Bill, with that one. If you're going to have creep in your job description, so say I'm an operational guy and I'm trying to fill the gaps in my business. I keep finding the gray areas and I'm trying to assign them to certain specific individuals. Am I at risk of, one, upsetting the employee, but two, is there any legal consequences to that, Suzanne? Should I watch out for what I'm continually adding as a job scope, or is it something they're just going to counter and try to get more an increase in wage?
Bill, you want to go or you want me to tackle the legal part?
That was to you.
Okay. All right, so an employer has the discretion to add job duties to from a legal perspective. So there's the legal side of things and there's the employee relations side of things. So the employer from a legal perspective has the discretion to add job duties to an employee's job. You have to be careful when you are looking at classification of employees as exempt or non-exempt under the FLSA, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that's the federal law that governs wage, hour, and overtime. So you have to be careful with exempt employees. Those are employees who are not entitled to overtime and they're employed on a salary basis, because you don't want to add too many non-exempt duties to an exempt employee's job, because that can affect the exemption. But setting that aside, an employer has the discretion to add or subtract or change or modify job responsibilities from a legal perspective as it wants to. It doesn't automatically entitle an employee to additional pay on the legal side. Again, there's the employee relations side that you have to think about, because you don't want to add too much to somebody's plate without compensating them accordingly. But from a legal perspective, absolutely, the employer can change the job description, add to it, subtract from it. But it is still important, like Bill and Kim have said, to have that written job description. And I, like Bill, have seen so many different clients who don't have them at all. And that can be very challenging when you have, on the legal side, when you have a case and you're trying to show that somebody wasn't performing their job and you don't have anything to show what their job was. So it's so important on both sides, on the employee relations side and on the legal side, to make sure that you have those job descriptions.
I'm going to wrap up this, and Bill, I was getting to your final question here. How important is having, obviously, a defined job description when they're coming to CareerSource? And then two-part question. How important is the job title, within different industries, right? So in manufacturing, does it matter if I just willy-nilly make up names, or is that, make it a little more elusive to find the right candidate?
No, I don't think the title itself, to me, in my experience, I don't think the title is all that big of a deal. It's more what's in the actual description itself, and whether or not, and once again, we're going to go back and forth, whether or not it's going to be a fit for that particular candidate and you as the employer. For me, it's more about the fit and whether or not somebody's going to be, and that's in the chat box from somebody who just brought it up. But that's going to be important to me. Is not so much the title. I don't really care about the title.
How about externally, though?
Externally,
if your clients are looking for a point of contact,
the title is going to have a problem if you're for the person down the road. So I could title someone out of an opportunity for growth. And if I'm calling someone a manager and all they're managing is their tasks, they're not a manager, but they are going to it's going to potentially have that conflict for them. And then they might say, well, I am a manager, and here I looked online, and then you all of a sudden set yourself up for this competition and conversation about something they found online for someone else with a completely different set of circumstances. I think people want titles naturally as humans. I laugh because my title is HR support. It's the same title for all people on my team, HR support, right? We don't have titles because at the end of the day, I don't want, it takes everybody. And I think that you have to look at your culture and think through what is the culture of your organization, because that would sometimes dictate your title structure and how it works. But another thing I did want to point out about those job descriptions is I have seen that people trying to do job descriptions will get very precise, and then it becomes like the list of what you can and cannot wear, where if it's not on the list, I can wear it. Right. And you don't want to put yourself into such a very fine definition that you actually get people to the point where they can say, well, that's not my job, when they're in an angered, pushed mode. So it is a little bit, there's a little finesse that goes into the writing of job descriptions. And yes, a lot of things fall under other duties as assigned, but you don't want to have like 3 very precise items and then other duties as assigned to be the bulk of it, because how can you say that the job exists to perform that when really the job exists to do, overview concepts, and that's where that conversation with the leader comes in, because they can hone in on the concept and what it means. But if you have the overview concept, you actually allow people to have that autonomy to go through and say, I'm going to perform these tasks the way I do it. I mean, nobody thinks in Kim logic, and thank goodness probably, but you know, Suzanne's going to do it her way. Bill's going to do it his way. I'm going to do it my way. As long as we get to the end result and it's performed to satisfaction for our customers and what our team needs of us, then as an organization, we have to go back and say, wow, that's what we needed, and embrace that.
I just want to add one thing really quickly about titles. And again, from the employee liability side, not so much the employee relations side, because I agree, you know, you need to make the titles that work for your business. But from the liability side, it's really, really important in the FLSA that I mentioned, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the classification of employees as exempt or non-exempt. Do not assume that just because somebody has a manager title that they are exempt from overtime and that you can pay them a salary and not pay them overtime, because it is not enough. The title will never control in that determination. And it's something that I see, unfortunately, employers get wrong all the time, and the damages can be significant when you get it wrong. So don't assume that just because you have a position with a title of manager that you can classify that person as exempt. You need to look at the actual exemption language, the duties test, because for each exemption, they have to meet the salary basis test, they have to make a certain amount of money per week, and they also have to meet the duties test. For a manager to be exempt under the executive exemption, they have to supervise 2 or more employees, they have to have the authority to hire, fire, their opinion given significant weight. But the important point about the title is don't assume just because somebody has a manager title that they're automatically exempt, because that is something I have seen a lot of employers be challenged by.
Okay, Suzanne, maybe you could mention the difference between what's written on the paper versus the duties as well in that risk.
Absolutely. Kim raises a great point, because again, what's written on the paper, it's really important, and that's what you want to control, but that is not what's ultimately going to control from a liability perspective. So you can have the perfect job description that says your manager is supervising, they're doing all the things that a manager should do, but if they're not actually doing those things, that is not going to cause them to be exempt. That is not going to protect you from a misclassification of that employee if they are not actually doing the duties of a manager. So you can have the perfect job description, but if that's not what the position's actually doing, that's not what's going to control.
Perfect, thank you. All right, I'm going to TO this topic, and we're going to move to a chat question I have. So regarding the employee handbook, how much should be shared with the candidate before they get an offer for employment? Or is that something you keep hush hush until they actually get in the office? And
bait and
Kim,
switch all the way.
Bait and switch.
No, go ahead. You tell it. I don't know who you wanted to answer that.
Kim, probably you, honestly, unless
Okay.
Bill, you want to chime in.
So I really, I'm going to pull this really awful answer and say it depends.
The lawyer answer.
Yeah, well, and I'm not a lawyer, and I say that I don't know how many times a day. I'm not a lawyer. But the reason I say that is because it depends on the role. If it's a leadership role, I would probably want to have conversations around what my expectations are about different policies and things that I know are going on in that team, to make sure that this is a person who's going to uphold my vision for what that team is going to do and what my policies are in place. So if their personal style does conflicts with what I have going on here and what the team that they are going to be leading needs, then there's no wrong answers, but it's just a wrong fit. And I hate to have an empty seat, but I'd rather have an empty seat than an upset team, because there's just a right place for everyone. But the rank and file person, I'd probably have a 1-pager that outlines the benefits of working for the organization. They're going to assume probably that you're following the appropriate laws based on the size of your business. If somebody is, I have heard of a situation where somebody asked about the disability policy in the interview process. That's odd. That was not documented, I'm sure. But I mean, but we document everything with the interview process, and we have this now, and now we have to actually offer that information because we did get asked it. And as an employer, and it's a huge red flag. What are they collecting for? What are they collecting information for? But important. So that's where it's important to really know someone like Suzanne and have her contact information when you deal with this type of situation. And you're like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. Please, dear Lord, hand me a heaven on a platter for the next person. But so, I mean, it's really kind of those unique situations that happen where it's just individualistic and the role. And I mean, for the typical manufacturing organization where people are coming in, I would probably share the leave policy. I would probably share your benefit package, but not the policies, but information about it, unless they're not competitive. And then I would try to sweep that under the rug. But you really just you're selling your business. When you're in the hiring process, you're a marketing agent. And so if your people that are working through that process with people are, and I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, bait and switch. If they are baiting and then switching, tell them to stop, because we want to make the hiring process as real as possible. We want them to see what they're really getting, because they're really going to quit it if it's not right. And then you've wasted all your time and energy, and you're doing it all over again in 3 to 6 months. And you're creating bad, word on the street about organization, because people talk about the negative experiences and they don't spend as much time talking about the positives. So you want to definitely make sure that you're going through and sharing what you need to based on the role and the conversation you need to have with that one individual, or that, I probably wouldn't share it until the final round of interviewing anyway.
All right, perfect. All right, I'm going to read one more question we have here in the chat, and then we'll try to get on to the next one. Cultural fit is a buzzword used in the interview process. However, this is elusive. Personality assessments may help reveal the candidate's disposition and demeanor. What experience does the panel have in this matter? At HRM forums, we also talk about fit versus fitness, such as how is our organizational fitness? Our organization may not be a great place to work. Anyone want to chime in on that one? I'll leave it open. You can read it in the chat too.
Go ahead, Kim.
Well, so I'll say that, culture is important for everybody. We spend more of our time at work awake than we do at home.
Yep.
So, and, not everywhere is right for every person. But back to what Bill does for a living, you can train someone to do the tasks, and you cannot train someone to be the type of human you want on your team. Suzanne works with teams all day long, different organizations. She does extreme trainings for organizations large and small. She's probably seen as many varied teams as I have. And some of them I would love to join, and other ones I'm like, wow, I'm glad this training's over. So it's just because of my personality. I'm not going to change who I am. And as we get older, I think that gets more and more true. So when you're looking for that, that cultural fit, not everyone can be a fit on your team. And we kind of go back to that, we're in a really bad place right now where people aren't dropping out of the trees to come and work for us. So now we've got this struggle of, do I fill the void and have a human doing the job, or do I wait for the right person? And I'm going to say that that's a 50-50 split too. It depends on the team they're joining. If the team is a strong bond and a strong heartbeat, you're going to wait, because they will much rather work harder for another couple of months even than get the wrong person joining their team that's going to bring them all down.
Yeah.
They're friends.
Yeah, and I'll go along with what you're saying. For me, it's both sides of the equation. From the employer standpoint, when you're right, it is the applicant flow is really almost non-existent at this point. And I would sit there and say a lot of manufacturers are just wanting to fill those positions, and it hurts if you don't have the right fit. And it may not be what the question was, cultural fit, but for me, it still comes down to a fit, whether or not that individual is going to stick for a long period of time, because it does cost money to hire somebody on and get them up to steam. And the other side of the coin is I work with a lot of professional candidates, and they're wanting to be in a position and want to be with an employer, let's say a big manufacturer, and they're a square peg and they're trying to put themselves in a round hole. It doesn't work. And trying to counsel that candidate going, it's not going to be a fit for your background, for what it is you're looking for. This particular manufacturer is not going to work. Why you keep trying to push it? And it ends up being a very bad situation. And, the usual bit, it's always greener on the other side of the fence. And that's not always the case. So I think fit is important, but size.
Okay. So
And we
Suzanne.
do personality exams, but maybe Suzanne could speak to the legal side of utilizing personality assessments in hiring, because I know that's a little different than looking at it and learning about the human and their style and behaviors, but maybe the legal side would be really beneficial.
And let me jump in and ask what I had for a question that related anyway. So
Yep.
in regards to, talking about the culture of your organization, is there anything we should watch out for being discriminatory at that point during the interview process? And then you can chime on to the rest of that if you want.
Sure. And it's interesting because just anecdotally, I, as a human and as a business owner, I view culture as absolutely something that's not debatable. It has to be a cultural fit for our business. One of the very first decisions we had to make when we started this firm 2.5 years ago was hiring our first employee. And in employment law, it's a very specialized field. There are very few people who have any experience with employment law. We happened to find a paralegal who had 20 years of employment law experience, but she came in for the interview and we knew almost immediately that she was not going to be a good cultural fit for what we visioned, what we had as a vision for our firm. And it was a hard decision, but we actually ended up passing on her in favor of employees who had no employment law related experience, but who had, the people we wanted to work with. We can, like Kim said, and I think Bill said as well, you can train the tasks, you cannot train the person to become the cultural fit that you want. It's the best decision that we have made from a hiring perspective on the culture side. On the legal side, it can get a little bit more touchy and complicated because, like the question indicates, it's an elusive term, it's a buzzword, it's something that's not tangible, easily definable, and it can lead to issues from a legal perspective. If, for example, your culture doesn't, allow you to hire people of a certain protected class, your culture. And if let's say you've, had 5 candidates interview for a position, 4 of them are of a certain protected class and 1 of them is not, and all 4 of the ones who are in the protected class just happen to not be a good cultural fit, and you hire the one who's not, that can still be a legitimate business decision for your business, but it gets risky because the perception is going to be, and the allegations are going to be, well, no, you just didn't want to hire XYZ protected class. You wanted to hire, the person who, is not in that protected class. So I will never sit here as a lawyer and tell any business owner not to consider the culture, not to consider the personality test, because I believe as a business owner, you 100% should. But you do have to be careful from a liability perspective, particularly looking at the overall big picture. What is your culture? How do you define it? And if you define it and it has a broad brush of individuals from all sorts of ages, all genders, all protected classes, all races, all national origins, or many, doesn't have to be all, because small businesses are naturally not going to have all. But if your culture is reflected, that you have a diverse, workforce, then you're going to be in a better situation from a legal perspective. But it is something that I believe 100% is important and a valid reason to make a business decision. But it can get hairy from a legal perspective, and there's just no good answer that I can give, black or white, because it's just not a black or white issue.
Do you protect yourself and your firm by almost putting together a skills assessment or a cultural assessment that you fill out with each interview you have to cover yourself in the event that there's a discriminatory clause?
So yes and no. The skills assessment, frankly, can actually backfire in certain ways, because you could have a person like our paralegal with 20 years of employment law experience who absolutely would have scored higher on a skills assessment than the people that we ultimately hired. So that can cut both ways. You want to have the skills assessment is absolutely important, you know, as the objective criteria, but you still are going to have that subjective culture fit. And I'm personally not aware of, you know, other than the personality type assessments, I'm not aware of any real objective way to define culture and hire by culture. Maybe Kim or Bill have some experience in that area that I don't, but.
Yeah, for the culture, you know, the best example out there, and, you know, I would say we'll not waste the time on the call, but, you know, Zappos is known for their culture. They bring people in, they do a training program of several weeks, and then they offer you money to leave if you don't want to really commit to it. But they have a culture book, and your culture is what your employees are doing when you're not looking. So if you think your culture is that it's a fun place and everybody's grumbling and I need to talk to HR, and oh my God, HR is not the complaint department. We do not do that. That's HR. So, but you know, when we go through the process of your culture is really what they're doing. So if your employees are acting a certain way, I think that our organization may not be a great place to work, right? That's the end of the note. If that's the case, that's actually your culture. So then you can start hiring, and again, waiting, don't just throwing people in there, but hiring people who want to be a part of change, and you need to set them up for it. Set them up ahead of time. I want you to be part of our change. I want you to be part of our transformation. I don't believe that today this is the great place to work that it could be. And I would like you to be a part of us changing it. So some of the things you're going to see are not where we're headed.
Okay.
But to kind of go full circle with what the question, cultural fit, that individual, when he was interviewing for that position, and it sounds like he's not too happy or she's not too happy, but the issue is that you know, as a you know, an applicant, you know if it's going to be right, you know, in your gut feeling, and it's very subjective. It's not objective, like Suzanne was saying. And so you either know or you don't know. And same thing with the employer. The employer knows right away if it's going to be a fit or not, generally right off the bat within the first 30 seconds of an interview. And so that kind of goes back to the very beginning of the process, not 6 months, 9 months, or a year into that employment.
Okay, thanks, Bill. I'm going to kind of switch a little bit here. So, you know, this relates to the culture and what you're trying to define. You know, the claim is that millennials are now bouncing from job to job, and it's tough to get long-term employees, and now every 2 years someone's bouncing. So how do we focus on trying to keep, I guess, the younger generation and invest in their training without losing those individuals? Bill, I guess I can start with you. What are you seeing from your end?
Well, I think, you know, the data that's coming out that I'm reading anyways, that perception is slowly changing. I mean, they're actually starting now to the point where the millennials are actually buying homes. They're wanting to settle down. They're trying to get the families going. They want to start a career. So I think that's kind of, you know, that used to be something that was talked about a lot 4 or 5 years ago. I don't see it so much now. So
Do you think employers are having anything to do with that in terms of changing their retention policies? Or do you think it's more of just the generation growing up and, you know, culturally switching?
Well, I mean, the numbers show for themselves that most, I hate to say it, most of the hires across, not so much here in Southwest Florida, but across the nation, it's 60 plus that are filling those positions, not the below 30 individuals. So they're slowly creeping in, but I don't think the culture from the employer standpoint is there yet. But at this point, I think the lack of flow for job seekers or job candidates are so minimal now. The employers are ready to really talk to anybody to see if they're wanting and willing for the position and be a fit.
All right, so locally, besides, I mean, you can count calling Career Source. What are some other avenues for local businesses to find, you know, new hires, old hires, pretty much anyone if it's a tight market?
Yeah, it's really, you got to start thinking, being very creative and start thinking outside the box. Of course, you got your, you know, obviously the job boards, you know, the Indeed seems to be the #1 in this area. but also reach out to the educational systems, especially when you're talking about manufacturing and tech schools. I know a couple manufacturers who literally, they have a relationship with the instructor or the professor, and literally they have that relationship with that classroom where if the instructor understands that this candidate or this student is really good, they can pick up the phone and right away call that employer up, and nobody else has a chance to get a chance to actually hire that person on. The other way would be social media. I hate to say it, referrals. Kim and I have talked about this before too, is referrals both internally and externally. And as well as networking. You've got a network like the SRMA where you're actually posting and you're trying to network within the community to get not only people from the industry, but people coming new to the area as well.
Kim, regarding internal referrals, what's your recommendation on that type? I know sometimes it can create conflicts, and I'm a little hesitant always to take internal referrals.
It depends on the size of the organization. The smaller you get, the harder it is, because having a small friend group in a smaller organization can really cause some additional strife that's unnecessary. But the larger you go, my recommendation is put money on it and put real money on it and spread it out. So at 90 days, they get this if they refer this person. And then at 1 year, they get this other lump sum. And then, but don't just throw it out there. Hey, we have a referral program. Talk to people. This is what we're looking for. We have team members who do this, this, and this, and it's so valued. And we know that you work with people who are, you hang out with people that are like you. So if any of your friends, anybody you know has the traits that we're looking for on this team, because remember, they're going to be your coworker. You don't want a slacker coworker. You want someone who's going to be working as hard as you do on a daily basis. Usually, if you do it with the conversation at an appropriately distant staff meeting, then you can go through the process of really outlining with them. Don't just hand me anybody just to get the money at 90 days, because first of all, it's going to look bad on you, and they're going to know that. But when you really take the time to say, we're looking for people to help you do your job. So if you know someone who is as hard a worker as you are, just do the assumptive to the whole group, as hard a worker as you are, and has the values that we bring, where we work hard, but we play hard, and we care about each other, and we help when we're asked, regardless of what the task is. And if you see trash, if they're the kind of person who's going to see trash on the ground and pick it up on their way through the yard, then by all means, that is somebody we'd love to hear about.
Okay, Suzanne, is there?
Go through that.
Okay, sorry, Suzanne, is there any policy we should have or any legalese behind disclosure of family relationships for internal referrals? I know sometimes employees will be reluctant to actually let you know that they're related to the person they're referring, and then you find out after they're both hired, and now you have kind of an internal bond that you can't break, or you could, but it might upset the employees. Where do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to have those policies, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a policy that prohibits all personal relationships, family relationships, but you should, in a lot of it, like Kim said, will depend on the size of the organization, but you absolutely want to require the disclosure of those relationships and set parameters for what the interaction between the familial members will be, because in a small family owned business, you're not going to be able to avoid having family relationships. In a larger business, you want to make sure that you are aware of them. Some employers prohibit them completely, and that's the employer's prerogative. The employer is the one who gets to set the rules in that respect. What I will generally recommend under most circumstances is if you have a personal relationship or a familial relationship, you should not have a direct reporting relationship. So you want to be careful about that. And I think it's always good to have that policy, but a lot of it will depend on the company. Like I said, the employer gets to set the tone, but I do think it's important to require disclosure so you can manage it appropriately. And part of the problem, is not necessarily just from a legal perspective, but you can create employee relations problems if you have, a family relationship where the perception of the other employees is that the family member or the girlfriend or the paramour is getting preference that the other employees aren't having.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. So another one relating to hiring, I typically see, there's a mismatch, especially for small businesses, right? Hire is really important when it's a large percentage of your workforce. So I typically see a mismatch between the time I need an employee and, when they start approaching the business and walking through the door. How do I handle this, and how do I, kind of sync those up? What's a good strategy? Bill, I'll start with you. Anything we can do? I can't keep them on retainer.
No. So rephrase the question.
All right. So let's say I get employees walking through the door all the time that want a job, especially when you start to get a good reputation in the industry, right? For taking care of your employees. But when I need an employee, it's typically not the same time frame, and then I'll return the call to that employee, but he's found a job already.
Oh yeah.
How do I sync those up a little better?
Okay. Yeah. So if people walking through the door, the normal routine would be is to really see if they're motivated and they really want the position or really want to be part of your organization. Bring them back 2 or 3 or 4 times. And I've gotten to the point where I will counsel manufacturers, smaller ones, like if you're not quite sure if this is going to be a fit or not, refer them over to me. I'll be more than happy to interview them, either in person or on the phone, and I'll give you my honest feedback, whether or not based on, because that's the whole idea for me, is really learning, having the relationship, a long-term relationship with the manufacturer. So if I already know the culture or know the environment that they're going to be working in, I might have a better feel. If not, and I can give that input. The other thing would be is, yes, unfortunately, the market is turning so quickly where if you do wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get back to that candidate, most likely they're going to be already off and running and doing something else. So it's
keep your eye on the market and see if something pops up while you're ready. That's kind of a decision.
Yes. Now I don't necessarily agree with holding paper, which is where an employer will actually interview, have resumes sitting there and have the applicant sitting there, the application sitting there, waiting in case something were to come up. I generally don't see that being too successful of an idea.
Okay. Now, in this market, right, I want to hire a new employee, but their salary is higher than the majority of the staff where they're gonna fit in. So now I've got longer term employees that are going to make less than this new employee. And typically in a lot of these work cultures, they talk about their salary and they talk about their wages. And now I'm setting myself up potentially for a internal conflict. How do you typically handle or recommend handling this, Kim? I mean, if I have to increase everyone's wages to hire one new employee, I also don't want to pick from the bottom of the barrel.
Start there. We're not gonna do that. One outside of the box idea for that potential walkthrough, by the way, is if you happen to be in manufacturing and have a 6 or 7 day work week or even 3 shifts, you could consider a part-time option for this person to get them in the door. Even if it's 1 day a week, they could get their feet wet so that when you do have a full-time opportunity, they don't even have it. They're already ramped as a possibility. They're probably working overtime where they are anyways, and they could just cut back on some of that overtime, which may encourage them to move over faster anyways.
It's true.
As a thought. So regarding the pay, pay is what it is, right? We have ranges and we have skill sets. And for something of that nature, I have seen it recently. It's been in manufacturing. Everybody is worth more, absolutely, than they get paid, right? I am worth so much more than I get paid. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to tell you a number that I'm worth. And you don't have to accept that, gosh, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, that's really outside of the range here, but now if you're coming with all these years of experience, it shouldn't be a problem because you're going to be on the range. I look at a range and, it's a chart, right? It's like the little line chart and you've got the low end, I've gone backwards, I think, low end of the range, high end of the range. And where you fall on that is your performance. So someone who's at the high end of the range, if they're like paid at the 75th percentile of the range, my thought is that means 75% of the people who do this job are worse at it than them.
Yeah.
So they are.
Sorry, is that range internal?
Amazing. Yeah. Pardon?
You talking about an internal pay range, or are we talking about industry wide? And
industry-wide and internal, because I encourage people to use, I mean, it is internal and industry-wide, but also it's cross-industry, because if I'm looking for someone who has a specific skill set, I may be in the medical industry, but if someone can use that skill set in aerospace, I'm still competing with them.
Yeah.
So I can't just look at my industry. I have to look at the role itself and that actual job. And so I look at that range and I say, if I'm going to bring someone in at 75th percentile, I'm going to hold them accountable to performing at that level.
Gotcha.
And I should, back to the job descriptions, I should have levels of job descriptions that outline why I'm bringing someone in at this level. And it's not personal, but gosh, Joe Jr., you know, if you would like to be making money up here, then these are the tracks. These are the learning skills you must attain and master. And then voila, you have this number of money too. But you haven't shown me those. Would you like a path? You know, because I have the path. We have all of the things inside of our plant that allow you to perform these functions and learn them. But you have not come to me and said, I am interested in growth. So, you know, I'm looking for that initiative.
So this question is open to anyone that may, you know, may relate to this. How do you benchmark against other companies and determine that industry wage down here? Do we have any resources for that locally?
I use the BLS. I use the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Bureau of Labor Statistics. If you draw the short straw and get the little yellow card, you have to submit your data on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual basis, and it has to be real as an employer. So, and it's based on the region. So if I could look at manufacturing I can look at a machinist in Naples and Immokalee, right? So it's Collier County specific or Lee County specific. Sometimes you don't get data and you have to go larger to the state level because they don't have enough responses to offer you your answer for that local area. But what I do know is it's not self-reported. So when it's not self-reported, it can't be inflated. Employers have to tell the right information. I could even use a nationwide for a specific role. If I can't find it in Florida or whatever state I'm working with, I can use the nationwide, and then we can do a little research to see where we are compared to the national norms as far as cost of living.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. Now, in regards to saving money or even, you know, testing someone out, what's the philosophy on 1099ing some workers? What's anyone have an opinion on that?
Do not do it. No.
Okay.
That's a Suzanne question. She'll give you the real
Suzanne,
answer.
all right.
Yeah. So misclassification, particularly now under this new administration or the change in administration, is going to be more dangerous than it has been in the last 4 years, because the Department of Labor specifically not only has rejected some of the more employer-friendly 1099 contractor rules. Not only has the DOL rejected the Trump era rules, the DOL, then the DOL is the Department of Labor, has said they're going to come out and, you know, ramp up enforcement against the misclassification of employees as 1099 contractors. One thing I do want to say, because I see it more often than I would like to, there is no such thing as a 1099 employee. By definition, that does not exist. Someone is either an employee or they are a 1099 contractor. You know, you don't want to blur the lines. And I know that it's not, from an administrative perspective, I know that it's not ideal to have to go through the hiring process and the I-9s and all of that to get somebody that you might not find works out a week later. But from a misclassification standpoint, you are not only now got the Department of Labor looking at you, you've got the IRS looking at you, you've got unemployment looking at you, you've got workers' compensation looking at you. So misclassification of 1099s is absolutely a very big deal from a legal perspective. And unfortunately, every different agency has its own test for what is a contractor and what is an employee. But, you know, if you are treating the individual effectively the same as all of your employees, but you're just calling them a 1099 or paying them on a 1099 either because they want to or it's easier, you don't want to do that. It's a 100% big area of liability for sure. And I just want to mention one more thing while it's on my mind. Jeff, you brought up when you were talking about pay and bringing in somebody in at a higher salary, employees talking about their wages and salaries. And I a lot of employers don't know that you actually cannot prohibit people from talking about their pay. I see policies when I get handbooks into review. I've seen a couple policies that explicitly say you're not allowed to discuss your salary, your bonuses, et cetera. And while I certainly, from an employer perspective, understand why you would want to limit that discussion, from a legal perspective, you cannot do that.
That's a great point. So here's a question. Oop, go ahead, Kim.
The way that I have some employers combat that is a 1, 2, or even 3-day working interview. So what we do is, because we're paying them, because we're benefiting from it, we're allowing ourselves to cover them. They sign a waiver, for regarding, liability purposes. But then we go through and we actually have them outline, do the job, work along with the people. And then I try to schedule it so that it's like on a Thursday, Friday, or a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Think about it over the weekend. Let's talk on Monday. Because I want them to feel like they're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing them. It needs to be a good fit, because I want to be talking to the person I hire in 2 years. I want to be talking to them in 5 years about how much they've grown. So do that working interview and let them see what it's really like. Especially if it's a very arduous task, because somebody who thinks that they can do it and then they realize, wow, this is like really heavy and I can't move on Saturday. That's going to work out long term.
Now, regarding your general liability insurance policy, do you have to have any provisions in there? Should you be contacting your broker first before you do anything along those lines? Okay.
Yeah, pass that torch, make it their responsibility, give it to the broker, let them earn their keep.
And now, with the 3-day training period, they don't really get time to have any internal training. If they're using any heavy machinery or any dangerous equipment, how do you navigate that?
It's not training. It's like an on the job. It's like a test. It's, it would be like in my office, I'm going to give them a pretend task. I need you to write up this, maybe a policy on this, and I'm going to have them do the research online and use all their resources and come up with a policy and give me an output. That's an example in my office of an online, of a working interview. So you should have a list of things that you want them to do, but you are going to pay them for it. I definitely would never encourage unpaid ever, because, and if you do end up hiring them, most of the time I go ahead and, we outline very specifically in the offer that we'd like you to do this working interview. Should you successfully complete the working interview, we would offer you a position upon the completion. Then we have a different offer letter for that, which clearly outlines when their start date is.
Yeah, see, I call it a real job preview, where somebody walks in and especially on a more professional level, where a lot of the candidates that I talk to, they're like, they want me actually to work. And it's like, well, they just want to make sure you actually have the skills you claiming you do. Go in there, and show them that you do have the skill level, and as long as they're paying you for it, and it is a preview. It's not an actual job yet. Go through the motions, and for some individuals, they're not used to that. But I agree, that's a good way to go, Kim.
That's a good point. All right, so how I guess this one's for Kim and Bill. What's your perspective on headhunting? Should you be contacting other firms and trying to get a hold of their employees in a tight market like this, or what do you guys see?
I'm just gonna say I fall back on the referral process.
Okay.
I don't headhunt. It's gonna come back to haunt me. I do have, I know in my manufacturing clients, they have very precise organizations they won't hunt from as a reciprocal arrangement, which I would, some of you feed each other, right? You're partners in a sense. And so make sure that we're going to play in our same sandbox tomorrow and next week and next year. So what you don't want to do is dirty up your sandbox with that. The reality is, yes, one man's trash is another man's treasure, but at the same time, and that's where a culture comes back in. Maybe they're an awful employee for me, but they're going to be a great employee for you because of your environment and what you need of people. Maybe I'm too talkative here, but over there, I'm going to be just fine. Sounds great. So it really depends on that. But then, we've also got the same environment, and maybe Suzanne should speak a little bit to what you can and cannot say if you get that referral call. for someone that note they shouldn't probably hire.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no real script, I think, but you do have to be careful, obviously. And if you know that you shouldn't be hiring somebody, I mean, from a legal perspective, you're not going to get in trouble unless the person has a non-compete or something like that, that they're obligated to with their current employer. But, you have to use really your business discretion, I think. And I think Kim's point about we all play in the same sandbox, I think that's particularly true here in Southwest Florida, because it's a small community and everybody's connected, one way or the other.
But going full circle though, yes, I would say, number one, I think headhunter, recruiter, if you really get yourself in a jam and there's nobody here locally and you're in the same sandbox. I know quite a few manufacturers that actually do look out of the state for recruitment purposes, as well as using the staffing agencies. And I even know of staffing agencies that actually helps the manufacturers industry that actually use headhunters to try to help them out. So I think it is a tool that you could use, whether or not you could use it all the time, especially for, as Kim was saying, the rank and file, maybe not so much, but for very specialized positions, that may be a way to go.
Yeah,
and some of those specialized positions, they may have, your industry. So if your industry has maybe it's a real hotbed in, I don't know, Ann Arbor, Michigan, right? Go ahead and post up there and say, hang up your snow shovel for a beach shovel and, move to Southwest Florida. I mean, be creative in that realm, and you can still, post your ad up there or post it in multiple locations, but tweak it a little bit for that person, relocation available for the ideal candidate.
Okay, that's a good point. We have one more comment, sort of question. So basically, it says my limited experience with temp agencies doesn't allow them to operate heavy machinery or machinery operation. So temp agencies, what do we call them, tradesmen or anything like that along those lines, do you have to be careful on your end, or are they going to let you know what the limit or what the liability is, or whether they can actually operate? Bill, do you have any experience with that when you're? Well,
yeah, I would say if that came across as a question, switch staffing agencies. There's a lot of agencies out there. When I was in the private sector, I belonged to a national outfit, and we actually had workman's comp for marine, for building docks, for building the boat lifts. And we were one of the only ones in the area that offered the workman's comp to be able to do that kind of work. So there are different agencies out there specialize it, and it's going to be up to you.
Who's the liability on if it doesn't get disclosed during the?
I would think it'd be the temp agency, because they're actually their staffing agency, because they're actually their employee. Suzanne, you can mention.
But they're on your property operating your machinery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got distracted because Bill, you appeared again on the screen, on my screen at least.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there.
Yeah, so it is a hotbed of litigation as to whose liability is between a temp agency and the on-site employer, and that is a frequent source of litigation between the temp agency or the PEO, whatever it may be, and the on-site employer. A lot of it's dictated by whatever the contract is between the two entities, and that absolutely should be very specific as to what people are allowed to do and not allowed to do. Just sort of anecdotally, I do represent a manufacturing company here that I know uses a temp agency, to staff its manufacturing and its warehouse and operations. I don't know the name of it, or I would say it, but I do know there's at least one here who will provide machine operators to manufacturers locally.
Okay, so look for someone specific.
And,
all right, and the last question.
Honest with that relationship is critical. No different than the honesty that you're going to have with your attorney relationship or anyone I work with. It's in my agreements that if you're not going to give me all completely honest information, I'm not going to be able to give you the outputs that you need. So making sure that when you're working with that agency, that you're giving them full disclosure information, because then they're going to be able to give you full disclosure back, and it's going to protect both sides.
Okay, I'm going to stop and review one last question I'm going to put out there for anyone that wants to answer. How should you handle the employee review process, right? So, in a small company, you get people requiring, or they want to come in and get their review annually, which falls on different dates for every single employee. So it takes someone to organize and all that. Policy wise, is it all right to, relocate those all within a single month? And then how do you manage the review process so that you're not, breaking the bank every year, but you're doing it in a way that isn't, really tedious on the management staff? And Kim, I guess I can start with you on that one. What do
So
you
my
recommend?
number one answer to this is when an employee is coming to you saying they're wanting a review, it translates very literally to please give me more money. So I say separate the two 100% of the time. Do you want a review? I'm happy to sit down in the next week and talk to you about your performance, because that's what a review is. Performance reviews are different than salary treatment, and you should always take them at different times. So you could have a situation, look at your fiscal year, and maybe you look at last year's fiscal year, and then you do your salary treatments 1 to 2 months later for everybody. And maybe you take the review into consideration, but part of it's based on merit, part of it's based on cost of living, and part of it can be based on the success of the organization. That can be your salary treatment, and just make it annualized and done with. So then you can actually have those review conversations, and it really depends on your size and how many direct reports you have. I like it both ways. So it really depends on the manager, and you can actually have it different for different teams. I like the fact that I can sit down and be in review mode, right? Where I'm thinking through the concepts, and then I'm doing this person, and then I'm not necessarily comparing against each other, but then I kind of am, because if they're on the same team, like who's really doing what and how are they performing to satisfaction or above. Always be honest, do not overinflate. Make sure that if your meeting expectations is arriving to work every day, that's not exceeding. Meeting expectations is performing, is creating and manufacturing products that meet quality standards. That's the expectation. That is not exceeding expectations. That's what your job performs to exist. So make sure you don't elevate that. And then, so you can either be in that mode where you're doing them all at once, or you can do them at anniversary dates. And most people have payroll companies that can automate some of this, and they can have reminders. They send out mass emails. I mean, I build those in the systems too. So, I mean, we have calendars. If somebody had a calendar to remind them to get on this call this morning. So I think if you use those types of things, you can do what works best for you. But I think you should also look at your leaders to say what's their style, because they're going to be most successful at it, and treat it honestly for what it should be, which is a plan for what's been going well and where we can improve and where we can grow this year. So if we look at it from that standpoint, then use your leader as the guide for how it's going to be best delivered to their team.
Yeah, and it should be a beneficial process for the employer too, right?
Oh, without question. Number one, you're going to be documenting, are they in fact meeting the expectations? And if you're changing the expectations, we talked about changing jobs earlier and adding things. Hey, this is meeting the expectation this year, but next year, in order to meet expectations, you're going to need to do X, Y, and Z. Now we've had the discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're documenting all of that, which helps you in case they aren't performing, but it also allows you to have that discussion with that person about their goals for growth over the next year. And if I'm the manager, what do I need to do to help that person reach their goals? If it's just signing off on a $500 class, then so be it. If it's more than that, then, I really need to know, can we withstand it? What's the cost share? What's the plan? Is it timeshare that I need to offer instead? I mean, we can really, you give yourself the opportunity through that discussion, if you're going to take it seriously, to build the rapport for the person who's not going to leave you.
Yeah,
so it works to retention.
No, that's a great point. I guess I'll mention one last thing since that wasn't too long. Basically cross training. Small companies, you've only got a few employees per department. So if you lose someone, we're talking about, in and out employees and retainage and all that. Do you offer any cross-training services or recommendations on where to cross-train, Kim, in terms of, keeping business continuity going?
I really do encourage always cross-training, because somebody's going to call out. Somebody's going to get COVID, or somebody's family member is going to get COVID, and they're going to get a 2-week vacation. Or they're going to say they had COVID. I don't know. I'm so over it myself. But
Yeah.
I should have worn my mask so you guys would know. Now you're going to actually notice me when I rip it off when I walk out of the grocery store. That's me.
I think it gives you flexibility too as a business, right? So if you have to make a strategic move.
The flexibility side, but more so, you get to, I say sell it to your team members, because if you're offering that cross training, then what if they find out through this training opportunity that they actually prefer that other job and they don't get bored? You know,
Yep.
I mean, you've got a bunch of different roles within your manufacturing plant, and it can get tedious, it can get redundant. So give them an opportunity to shift and swap jobs and learn it and then embrace it. And then maybe they find out, wait, I really love this. This is like very intricate and it serves this. And they would have never even been exposed to it had you not known. And you could, again, back to that, people quit every couple of years. They're quitting because they get bored. They've done it all and they want to learn something new. Give it to them inside your own plant.
That's a great point. All right, it's 9:25. I'm going to start wrapping this up. First, I'd like to thank everyone that attended. Thank you for your support of the manufacturing industry down here. Thank you for supporting the Southwest Regional Manufacturing Association. Thank you a ton to our panelists here, Susan, Kim, Bill. Appreciate the time. We wouldn't be able to do these events if we didn't have experts like you on the board. So with your efforts, I think we can keep this growing. And to keep this growing, if you know anyone or you're on this call, since it is free and you'd like to join the association, we won't be free forever. This is a COVID temporary thing. Also, if you know anyone that may want to sponsor an event, it can be an affiliate, anyone that's looking to potentially market towards the manufacturing industry, anyone that supports industry growth down here besides, the standard two of travel and leisure. We'd love your support down here. We want to really bring manufacturing back regionally. I think that's a national goal, but it's also a local goal. So we appreciate any memberships, any sponsorships, anything anyone can do to support this organization and manufacturing in the area. So if you had a question during this event that didn't get asked, or you'd like to follow up with one of the panelists, you can email us at info@srma.net or reach out to the panelists directly. They did a great job. Like I said, I didn't let them know what the questions were going to be, so they all answered those off the cuff. Again, we're going to start opening up events, I believe, pretty soon. If COVID keeps trending in the right direction, that means we'll be doing some more local events in regards to social events, some plant tours, so you can see some manufacturers here locally. But keep in touch if you'd like to be on our mailer list, or keep in touch and have contact with the SRMA. Again, email us and we'll connect you to the right person. So thank you again, anyone that joined today. Go ahead, Bill.
We do have a plant tour scheduled for May 19th from 8 to 9:30. It's going to be on the website, or is on the website, as well as our first social for the last year plus. It's going to be June 16th at Riptide Brewing Company, which was part of Momentum about a week ago. So the owner of Riptide actually took over Momentum Brewing, which is located at Bonita Beach Road and 75. So it's in between the two counties that are heavily with manufacturers, to make it easier for the manufacturers to actually join and to network and have a good time.
Thanks, Bill. So again, reach out to the SRMA if you want to keep connected. Our goal is really network everyone and create synergistic relationships here in Southwest Florida for manufacturing. So thanks again, everyone. Look forward to seeing you at the next event, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.